we got to discuss some Street Fighter 6 knowledge. We got to break things down for the people. And honestly, it's something I just want to talk about a little bit and maybe share some ideas. And it's the concept of chip and kind of lack thereof in Street Fighter 6. Street Fighter 6, one of the biggest things about it, of course, is the drive system, right? That's really what makes Street Fighter 6 Street Fighter 6. And I think a really interesting component about how this game differs from past Street Fighter titles is the removal of chip damage to your actual health bar, and instead, chip damage applies to your drive meter. So as you're passively blocking attacks, it will instead chip away at your drive meter. If that depletes and you go into burnout and you have no more drive meter, then traditional chip damage will then take place, where blocking a special move will apply chip, and sometimes a lot of chip. The chip is actually very high in this game when you're in burnout. You ever blocked a level 3 when you had like 25% life and you just die?
Yeah. There's been spots where somebody will go and do that, and I'm like, oh, he miscalculated. Right. I miscalculated. KO every single time. And bro, honestly, man, I think that this system, like you said, this is way different than any other Street Fighters. But I like it a lot better. It's interesting. It is, man. It makes it more. The system is pretty complex, and then once somebody does go into burnout, it actually means a whole lot. Like I remember at the beginning of the game, we weren't sure how to take advantage of it. Now that we found out how to get guaranteed drive impacts, or if somebody's like goes full screen against Guile or JP after they're put into burnout from a level 3 or something like that, you already know it's guaranteed GGs.
You want to avoid burnout. It's very punishing, right? So the fact that chip applies to your drive meter, it definitely means you got to make a move, you got to do something.
Yes.
But also I feel like it's pretty dynamic because you regain drive meter faster for doing offensive actions as well, like walking forward, for example. That builds back your drive meter faster. So it has a really interesting give and take where it's like in previous Street Fighter titles, you couldn't afford necessarily to block forever because of that passive chip damage. Your life would literally deplete, a resource you don't regain. Drive meter, though, it's dynamic. You can build that back, right? If you go into burnout, it's punishing. Yeah. But even if you go into burnout, there's a chance you might get your drive meter back and survive, right? So it's not a permanent resource loss to block things out. And you have parry. So if you choose to parry something, it's a little bit of a slightly higher risk block because it also costs half a bar drive meter. If you whiff it, they can throw you or punish you. And if you just whiff it and you don't make contact with anything, you're depleting your drive meter faster. But it's pretty interesting, that dynamic, because we saw with that like Snake Eyes Reynolds matchup.
Yes.
When Snake Eyes was full screen from Reynolds using JP in the grand finals of CPT West, he didn't even use parry from full screen, where JP has those full screen projectiles. And traditionally, I would have said prior to that set that that's not a good way to approach it, because JP wants to make you block these projectiles to then put you in burnout, right? But then you look at the way Snake Eyes approached it, he mostly did no parrying at all, which when you do that, it prevents having JP do like the portal where he teleports down and he baits your parry and teleports in and throws you. It removes that option from the table. And also, he's like walking forward and bulldogging his way in, regaining his drive meter. So you're watching these matches, and Snake Eyes is like slowly inching his way in. 20 seconds have passed, and he has all his life and barely lost any drive meter, and it's pushed JP into the corner. And I was like, wait a minute, what happened?
It make you think. It's like that Adam clip, the Adam clip from Twitter that you had quote tweeted on there.
Right.
Similar concept. It was a Manon versus JP. Extremely patient.
Well,
he got zoned out for that long.
Idom showed the opposite of it, where you can parry as well. Because the difference between those two is Idom had to parry because Idom was stalling. That's my hot take there. Idom did not approach at all. If you don't approach, you have to parry because you're not going to build back your drive meter. Because you can't afford to sit there and take the...
Right. That's so deep. Yeah, you can't afford to sit there and just take the
You see the mentality difference. Snake Eyes says, I'm approaching you. I don't need to parry. I don't need to risk getting portal to throw. I'm going to walk forward and regain drive meter. Idom said, I'm going to bank on you getting bored from zoning me. I'm going to parry last second every projectile, and I don't need to move. So the parry makes it so that you don't have to make a move. He can just run the clock as well from full screen doing nothing.
And that's also why I believe, so people make jokes and stuff about like, oh, JP having extremely strong offense or while also being a zoner, or about Guile having strong offense while also being a zoner. Everything you can tell from the developers is very intentional with Street Fighter 6. There's a reason why like they make these zoning characters very strong on offense, and I think the reason is because, like you said, you're forced to make a move. The fact that we have parry means, in theory, if Guile want to throw booms all day, I technically could just sit there and parry them all day.
Right.
and the match just nothing's gonna happen.
Right.
Parrying automatically nerfed the fireball game.
Right.
Guaranteed. So
I think
now
people
you
don't
need
think
to
about
move
that
forward.
with the zoners. Well, like
No,
that,
they don't.
That both parties can choose to stall. I think what makes the zoners strong in this game right now, like JP and Guile, is not just the zoning. It's the fact that they have the zoning that can lead into offensive pressure. You have to make a move. Guile and JP players are rushing you down. I don't know if people realize that.
Yes, that's what's happening.
The only time they
Guile
don't rush you down,
low four into flash kick and all this, yeah.
They don't rush you down if you're slipping up on the zoning game. But you see, like in that matchup with Idom's like, listen, your zoning's not that good.
Yeah,
I'm going to sit here and parry you forever and force you to come to me, right? And if they had both mutually agreed, they could have gone to timeout and just had a draw game.
Yeah,
because that's how the game works. Like someone has to make a move. So I still think offense is better, but it's cool how on defense, like I think there's still a mind game because like for a while nobody was using parry on defense because we were just not used to the mechanic. Then we're like, okay, wait, I should parry on defense because then I don't lose drive meter if I parry everything. Wait, but if I don't parry everything, I can then walk between strings, regain my drive meter, and not risk being punished counter throw.
Do you think people are thinking about that part? The walk. I don't think people are thinking about this whole walk forward recovering gauge as much.
I would argue
I think Snake Eyes
is.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the Zengi players are kind of forced that mentality.
Yes. Yeah,
because that's the character. I think that's part of the meta that's evolving right now, and I think there's other aspects of it too, like just not the fact that you can really block things out. You parry things out to a certain degree that you really couldn't before because there's no chip damage. It's interesting to see. Like if Balrog was dash punching you all day in Street Fighter V, that chip damage eventually you're going to be. Eventually you're like, this is actually meaning something at some point.
It automatically makes the game a lot. It actually makes the game a lot deeper, in my opinion, and just more expanding the conversation. I think it makes it more spectator friendly. Outside of the fact that like perfect parries are just so godlike and hype as far as like, you know, in a huge moment, if there's a perfect parry, the screen slow down and all that. But just the fact that it does force us to walk right at each other. And I think that is why we see some of the results that we see. Like Angry Bird being like arguably the best in the world right now. Look how Angry Bird was always the most aggressive Zeku player back in Street Fighter V. Now when Street Fighter 6 comes, or you see Mena right there with him in grand finals, extremely aggressive players. You know, we're not really seeing as much of like the zoner, the super lame zoner guys cook up quite as often in this game because I feel like you're forced to fight right there up close and make quick time decisions. So. Definitely the drive gauge system overall, I think, just makes for a deeper overall experience. Burnout as a whole provides for some of the sickest moments because now all of a sudden, of course, you can't DI back or anything like that. So we're seeing some people start to, I don't know how good you've gotten with it yet, Brian, but some people are actually starting to back throw on reaction to some of these DIs. Some people are starting to, and of course you have the people going for you buffering your super to punish the DI. But then at that point, that means that you're not holding back and blocking in that spot, or maybe a neutral jump, or, you know, I think at the beginning with this game, we did not know that this was going to get as deep as it's gotten. And meter management has always been a huge important thing in any Street Fighter. I think that right now it's more important than ever. And I actually think that's one of
course,
players like Punk, that's some of their biggest strengths. You never really are going to see him forcing himself into burnout.
Right. Only when it's going to kill. Like
when it's worth it.
He has that optimization down like a science. You know, he knows how to not overextend. I think that's a huge thing, is not overextending. Like knowing when to do a drive rush cancel in order to get offensive pressure or to extend a combo to get a favorable situation, and when is that worth it? And that's actually a tough question. I think a lot of decent but not great players, I think that's where they suffer the most. They overextend their hand and they go too hard, burn too many resources, and then if they don't keep that snowball going, that momentum going, and suddenly, you know, they get a lucky jump out of the corner and they swap sides, you're 2 block strings away from being in burnout, right?
So do you think, I gotta ask you directly before we even close this topic out, do you think that most players, when you're running in rank and everything, are going about fighting against zoners in the wrong way?
Oh, against JP, absolutely. People have improved. I think,
but on
you know,
average,
If you asked me a month and a half ago, I would say absolutely.
Okay.
I would say, and also, I'm gonna give a big shout out to Capcom with the MR system update. You know, like
Fire.
I play some killers now, so I'm playing good players who know what they're doing, and sometimes I'm beating ass, sometimes they're beating my ass. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yep.
it's real sets these days at all levels of ranked. So I would say now for sure people know what they're doing. Month or two ago, I was like, why does nobody parry anything? Like, not even doing the Snake Eye strategy of walking forward. They're holding back.
They're just sitting there dying.
Sitting there dying slowly and be like, I can't do nothing. I'm like, well, maybe there's a mechanic called parry. You press 2 buttons and
yes.
you don't get chipped.
There's
So,
no
yeah,
waste. There's no random mechanic in this game, bro. Everything
I think
need
the
to be
people are
used.
getting real good. I think the level of play now is actually getting really, really high. And that's a topic we like to talk about all the time, like Street Fighter V back in early seasons of No Neutral. I think even now in Street Fighter 6, we're starting to see that ramp up where it's extremely competitive.
Like the base level,
level
of play is.
There's
higher
so
than
many
ever.
players I run
Yeah.
into who I've never heard of before. I'm like, this guy is nice, you know.
Bro,
like,
who's that
they
dude
weren't
from
established
Kansas
names.
City in Midwest?
Kung Fu Hustle.
Yes, the jury dude.
I used to play him randomly in ranked like week 1. I was like, why can't I beat this guy? So,
and you didn't know he was this nasty.
And of course, part of that is the meter management, or a huge part of it. I feel like, yeah, if you put yourself on burnout, you don't block properly, you don't parry properly, it's donezo. I think even Idom mentions like that's the most important part of the game. Like he's been really optimizing that really well,
Yep.
helping him hold on for dear life with Manon there.
Oh my gosh, and hopefully Idom does let go of that fight soon.